Max, a teenager, laments his inability to simply be normal at the office of a psychotherapist. He was born with a face so stunningly gorgeous that it would kill anybody who saw it, which is why his entire face is covered in bandages. Given that people are often glad to have seen his attractive face, at least it isn't a horrible death. Max tells the tale of his birth, stating that he murdered the hospital's doctors and nurses once they saw his face. But fortunately, his parents are immune to their son's good looks. The research conducted that day showed that the beauty of his face results in a hormonal surge that instantly kills a person. To safeguard Max and the other children, the family had to relocate to a small community and take as many safety measures as they could, including choosing to homeschool Max. Max unfortunately grew up alone and quite secluded as a result, and he feels uneasy among other people. Additionally, odd is his pastime. He enjoys stitching. The psychologist insists that Max show his face since she doesn't think the narrative is true. Max's parents notice an odd noise coming from the psychologist's office all of a sudden. When they run inside, they discover the psychologist dead on the floor and Max putting on his bandages once more. As soon as the police arrive, they inform the parents that they cannot continue to dismiss these fatalities as accidents, and that Max must exercise greater caution to avoid going to jail. Max notices a brick and picks it up to carry home while the grown-ups are conversing. Max becomes annoyed when his parents encourage his only buddy Dan to sign him up for a dating app after telling him they don't like him being home all day. Max requests Dan to strike him with the brick later on in his room so he may stop looking so deadly attractive. Dan hits Max as intended as Max throws his phone on the ground as he becomes overly preoccupied with it, and the alerts from his dating apps. Max and his mother wind up in the hospital, and while waiting, the mother reads in a magazine that they are searching for families to host exchange students, which would be an opportunity to invite another adolescent to the house so Max can have a friend. Max finds the concept repulsive and searches the rack for another magazine, but it is empty. Before Max is summoned by the doctor, a girl named Alex who has the final magazine chooses to share it with him. The two teenagers engage in a lengthy conversation. Later, Dan makes the decision to set up Max on a blind date in an effort to make him feel better. Dan starts chit-chatting with the girl when they first meet at the restaurant to help break the ice. But as soon as he departs, things get exceedingly awkward. The girl is obviously apprehensive of him because of his looks, so Max gives her a handkerchief with her name stitched on it to make himself seem friendlier. When things start to look up, they are abruptly alerted by noises that Craig is making problems in the restaurant. With the goal of flirting with the girl, the guy walks over to their table and sits down with them. But when he notices Max's bandages, he knows that he is the man from the fatal stories. Max wants to leave to avoid issues because he is so rude and frightening, but when he stands up, he accidentally knocks over their drinks. To make fun of Max, Craig tosses the handkerchief into the drink and continues to put pressure on him to show his face, even going so far as to shove him up against the table. Thankfully, the wait staff takes advantage of the opportunity to eventually ask Craig to leave. The girl declines Max's subsequent request for another date since she is now frightened of his face. Max feels he'll never lead a regular life after such a catastrophic date, so he attempts to take his own life at the closest bridge. A talk about his life, sweets, and Max's desire to swim in a tub of jelly beans begins until Alex unexpectedly enters the scene and taunts him for what he's doing. Alex urges Max to go with her, and they take a bus to a retirement home where he meets Rosemary and Esther, two elderly women who have terminal illnesses, in an effort to divert his attention. The four of them spend a lovely time together since they are all still extremely vivacious. They discover Esther is attempting to write one more book before she passes away, but finding it challenging due to her Alzheimer's, while they share tea and pastries. Alex escorts Max home after they leave the retirement community. Max asks if they may see each other again, but Alex declines. Later, as Max is hanging out with Dan advises him not to give up. Dan believes he should stay around at the locations he saw Alex at in the hopes of running into her since Max is unable to search for Alex on social media since he doesn't know her last name. Max creates an embroidered piece that evening inspired by the bridge incident. Max decides to go back to the bus stop the next morning and discovers Alex purposefully skipped her trip. At first, Alex is a little leery of him, but she eventually decides to enjoy herself with him. They ultimately realize Max's fantasy by going to the market and purchasing a large quantity of jelly beans to fill the bathtub in his bathroom. This prompts Alex to admit that she would like swimming in a river of gelatin. Max ultimately reveals his murderous face to her as she's enjoying the sugar bath, but Alex had a hunch he was the character from the tales. Alex replies that she is allergic to endorphins due to a unique cardiovascular ailment. Her heart grows as a result of the inflammation that excitement creates. Then Alex demonstrates how she must always wear a monitor that measures the size of her heart beneath her jacket, and explains why her body rejects feelings. She's now using an experimental drug to treat it. Max is relieved that someone finally understands his condition after hearing all of this. After that, they watch a movie while inebriated and giggling at every little thing that happens. Then, when they visit Max's house, Alex is able to appreciate his stitching and requests that he one day create a design of her. Alex suddenly approaches him too closely and removes his sunglasses, which briefly frightens Max. Fortunately, he can't murder with only his gaze, and the two teenagers are currently sharing a tender moment that could culminate in a kiss. Max's parents unfortunately show up right then and there and ruin the moment. The parents are shocked and can see that the adolescents are separating swiftly. Max's mother hugs Alex because she is so overjoyed that Max has finally found a girl. Yushin, an exchange student who would be residing with them going forward and who has brought a cat with her, is also introduced to the children by their parents. She mostly ignores the family, though, and is somewhat antisocial. She orders her own meal, even during supper, so she may eat by herself. Max and Alex start spending all of their time together after that, and they frequently go to the nursing home to drink tea or play games with Rosemary and Esther. When the teenagers decide to go camping one day, Max gets into a fight with his parents, who then force him to bring Yushin along. The party heading to the forest the following day eventually consists of Dan, his most recent date, Yushin, Max, and Alex. While Yushin continues to ignore them, the others enjoy exploring and snapping photographs. Alex cuts her hand on a branch accidentally, and Max uses some of his face bandages to bind it up, which causes Alex's heart to beat a bit quicker. As Yushin slumbers, Dan and his girl huddle under a blanket for some privacy as they pitch camp later that evening. Max makes the decision to take Dan's lead and covers himself and Alex with a blanket before preparing a surprise. Before bandaging her eyes, he instructs her to close them. He then takes her hands to force him to touch his face and assess his appearance. Alex soothes Max by giving him a kiss before removing the cover after he admits that he killed the girl who gave him his first kiss because she disobeyed the law and opened her eyes. A few days later, Alex phones Max to let him know that she can't meet up with him today since her mother needs her assistance with some housework. The old Christmas tree is then removed with Dan's assistance when Max's mother urges him to do so. Yushin is smoking in the meantime, and when she extinguishes her cigarette, she unintentionally ignites the tree. Dan inadvertently burns his hands as Max and Dan race to attempt to delay it. They then take Dan to the hospital. After Dan's hands have been attended to, the lads try to depart but run into Alex and her mother. Alex had actually been here the entire day, despite lying. When the boys try to introduce themselves, Alex informs her mother that they are merely employees from the elderly home, and the boys go away silently. Max wonders how to know whether he's in love as he shops with his dad the next day. The father advises him to tell Alex directly since although he knows his son likes her, it might not be evident to her. Alex confesses that she had to lie yesterday because her mother doesn't like that she has friends and fears that too much excitement would kill her. They hang out with Max again in the afternoon. The retirement home is solely supported by her mother because it is a dull location. After that, they go to the retirement community where they are shocked to discover that Rosemary is passing away. When they go to see her in her room, they find out that machines are keeping her alive, which disgusts Alex since she believes individuals should be allowed to pass away with dignity. Rosemary has to be able to die in peace, so Alex begs Max to confront Rosemary. When he declines, Alex walks away by herself. Max reconsiders his decision after considering Rosemary's suffering and enters the room again, where he yells Rosemary's name. He begins taking off his bandages as soon as she opens her eyes, and Rosemary notices what's happening but doesn't stop him, passing away with a gentle smile on her face. Following this event, Alex stops responding to Max's messages, and he is at a loss as to what to do. When Max's parents try to give him some advice, it just leads to a fight and him leaving to hang out with Dan. His friend has some exciting news. Even though Max is homeschooled, Dan thinks Max should attend the celebration that will be held at the neighborhood school. Dan gets his phone and texts Alex to ask her to the dance since Max is too terrified to do anything. Max visits Alex's house to inquire as to why she has chosen to ignore him after receiving no response. When Alex admits that the experimental treatment isn't working, her heart continues to swell. Alex ultimately agrees to go to the dance with him after they dispute over the fact that she has been pushing him away. Max, though, continues to be supportive. On the party day, Alex arrives with 2 amusing costumes she purchased from an adult store. She will be dressing as a maid, and for Max, she purchased a dog mask and horns so he can be a horned dog. They had a great time dancing and flirting when they get to the school. At first, the music is upbeat and appealing, but as they get to know one another, a slow love song takes over. Alex's nose starts to bleed at this emotional time, and her heart begins to beat dangerously quickly. She hurries outside to stop the bleeding. Max hangs out with Dan and his date as he waits, but the conversation is cut short when Craig approaches to disturb them. While his companions capture Dan, Craig grabs Max and pulls off his mask, killing Dan's date instantly out of jealousy that Dan is dating his ex and out of want for retribution for what occurred at the restaurant. As the cops show up to take Max into custody and place a bag over his head, people start to panic. He sees Alex being whisked away by an ambulance as he exits the building. Max is held in a cell that night. Max is released the following morning, and when he arrives at the hospital, Alex's mother gives him a bear hug to express her sympathy. Later, when Max sees Alex, he discovers that she had been lying the entire time. She had been downplaying the severity of her ailment, but it turns out that she genuinely has a fatal disease, and she has known since she was a little child that she will pass away at this time. Given that she only has a few days left and that she detests being hooked up to a machine in the hospital, Alex begs Max to identify him for her. Max screams at her and says he's watched people die all his life and it's taken a toll on him because he doesn't want to see her die. After that, he turns away and stops listening to her. When Max returns home, he is so distraught that he decides to use the brick to pay for cosmetic surgery, but his parents intervene right away. When the bandages fall off when they are holding him during his breakdown, he accidentally kills Yushin's cat. In the days that follow, Max disregards all correspondence from Alex. Later, Max comes to the funeral of the dead girl with Dan. Max is made aware that he would lose the opportunity to say farewell by Dan as he reprimands him for ignoring Alex while he is mourning. The following day, Max pays a visit to Alex in the hospital and, in addition to embroidering a pattern of her on the wall to express his regret, he also exhibits it to her. Alex's condition is deteriorating, so Max falls down next to him and takes off his bandages. They then shut their eyes and kiss while bracing themselves for the worst. Alex is still alive when Max opens his eyes, which shocks him. However, she is so ecstatic to finally see the real Max that her heart can't handle it, and she still passes away. She is at least grinning as she recalls all the time she spent with Max. Later, Max attends Alex's burial while still reeling from the loss of the one and only female who ever showed him love. He then brings an envelope with Alex's name on it and heads to the bridge. He places Jell-O powder inside the package before dropping it into the river to fulfill Alex's wish. After Alex passes away, Max resumes treatment and starts remembering the lessons Alex taught him. The police exonerate him and Craig of all charges because the death of the girl was thought to have been a natural cause, and he continues to visit the retirement home to keep Esther company. But as word spreads about this case, Max starts to receive a flood of messages from dying individuals pleading for his assistance. Max starts to realize that sometimes dying is essential, and he starts to go see the individuals who write to him to help them find peace with a painless death. Max also learns that Alex didn't pass away because her immunity was granted by real love, which is also the reason his parents never passed away. Dan is Max's only genuine buddy, therefore Max can stop wearing the bandages and start hanging out with him. He must exercise caution though, since one day he opens the door without realizing his face is exposed and accidentally kills Craig, a guest.